today we will be looking at Revelation chapter 21. Revelation chapter 21. This is the chapter that we've all been waiting for, and in some regards, as we will see, uh, we've already experienced a foretaste of it, and that's why we're so excited about what is in store for us in the end of all of these things. By the time we get to chapter 21, the evil in this world has been dealt with. It's been pushed off into the lake, the burning lake. It's been uh, forever ridden of, and it no longer will cause us any of the pain and distress that it has been causing all of this time. Once we reach the end of the story, we in fact realize this is not the end of the story. This is really the start of an epic new beginning. How God has reformed everything so that it is not like how it used to be. It's better than it used to be. It starts off by John saying, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away." Now, what does it mean when he says, "I saw a new heaven and a new earth"? In translation, there's always going to be some difficulty because finding the exact words is not always easy. But the simple translation for the word that's used there in Greek is the word new. But even in English, the word new has a couple of different meanings. For example, if I get a car and someone asks me, "Oh, Achin, did you get a new car?" It could be that I got a brand new car, or it could be that, no, this is a new car for me, meaning that it could be a young car, or it could be a car that is better than the one that I had before. It is new in that sense. And in Greek, there's two different words that are used for describing the word new. The word kainos and the word neos. Kainos is the word that's used here in this passage. And so it doesn't refer to something new in time, it refers to something as being new in quality, something that is renewed, something that is made better than the last. That is kainos, whereas neos is something that is new in time. So kainos, this kind of new, emphasizes that there is a quality change that is happening, not some sort of time-bound getting rid of the old, and now we're starting over from scratch and we have a new one. To put this in context, a very similar sort of thing happens to each one of us. Paul says that when we are in Christ, we are a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. In that sense, none of us thinks that when we believe in Jesus that we were destroyed and then recreated for the second time, and the second time we're new. That's not what it's talking about. It's a newness that is a qualitative newness. We're not the same people we used to be. Think of it as, when a child goes off to college, and as they make that transition from being a dependent child, now they've lived in the college world and they come back and they're rather capable and responsible and somewhat independent. And you might think to yourself, what happened to that old child that left? Because now there's a new kid who's come into this home. And of course, it's not that a different person has come in, but there's a qualitative change that's happened. And so this is the kind of thing that's being talked about here. He saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth has passed away. Very similar language to Paul when he talks about our conversion experiences. And so a similar sort of renewal is happening where the old ways of this creation are no more. They're gone, they're passed away. And now the world is brought to a better quality, a better creation awaits for us. It awaits for all of us who are called to live in a Christ-like way. So in spite of all of the evil and the wickedness that we see rising up around us, we know that that world will come to an end. And when Christ returns, he's going to bring everything into a new beginning, but you will hear echoes of the first beginning. In the rest of these two chapters, you'll find several traces, intentional traces of Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, and even a little bit of Genesis chapter 3 that are sprinkled into these chapters. And the intention is to help us recognize that it's almost like we're going back to the way things should have been, to the way things ought to have been before evil came and messed everything up. The entire story of the exile from the garden is now being reversed because the garden is coming to us. And this is the beauty of this passage. But we'll talk a little bit more about who's moving in just a second. The end of verse 1 has an interesting mention there. It says that the seas were no more. The sea was no more. What does that mean? What did the sea do that was so bad that means that it does not get to be there in the end of all things? Well, we had talked about this before when we had our series when we looked at the different themes in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. But just as a reminder, when we look at the creation story, and even if you read carefully through the book of Psalms, you'll find echoes of an idea that the sea is a metaphor or it is a personification. It is like chaos that is coming up and trying to fight against God. Of course, there's no match because God is able to cut the sea, the waters in two, and separate them so that it's not going to destroy us anymore. And there are times when Jesus was in the boat with the disciples and he calms the sea. These ideas make it very clear that God was always in control, but from the perspective of humans, there's always this lingering presence of the sea. When are we going to get rid of that sea? And when you get rid of that sea, you get rid of all the evil that's associated with the sea. Remember back to Revelation chapter 12, verse 18. Where is the dragon? Well, the dragon comes all the way up to the shore, but doesn't come onto the land. It's kind of the dragon's domain is the sea, those chaotic, relentless waters. So if you read Revelation chapter 12, verse 18, then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. And so now when the sea is gone, what it's telling us is, don't worry, there's no chance, there's no potential, there's no possibility of any evil coming back into this world. The sea is no more. So it carries a great deal of significance and weight for us. And then in verse 2, John sees a holy city coming down from above. And what is this holy city? This holy city is the New Jerusalem that's coming down from heaven and coming out of heaven from God, adorned as a bride for her husband. So this is a new kind of Jerusalem. It's better than the Jerusalem that we know of. It is a heavenly Jerusalem. It's the Jerusalem that is pictured as the bride of Christ. So for us as New Testament believers, as people who have anticipated all of this from even the Old Testament readings, we know that this is pointing to the kingdom of God, that place where God reigns clearly, supremely. That place, that kingdom is the bride of Christ. And notice, it is coming down from heaven. No, at this point, I'm sure that the Lord's Prayer will not be quite as relevant anymore. For example, saying "Thy kingdom come" won't have the same weight because at this time the kingdom has fully arrived, and so that prayer becomes a bit pointless, we could say. The thing that we've been praying for and we're praying for all these days when we talk with God finally happens at this end culmination, and heaven comes down to us. where else have we seen this term, heavenly Jerusalem? It's not just in the book of Revelation. It's found in other places as well. Most significantly, it's found in the book of Hebrews. So the author of Hebrews saw the heavenly Jerusalem as a picture of what was or what is to come. Abraham, when he's listed in the lineage of faithful people, he writes that Abraham looked towards that city that was built on the foundations of God. And this heavenly city, this place that he was looking forward to, later on in Hebrews chapter 12 is very clearly told to us. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22. There, the writer is talking about when we worship in spirit and in truth, we're not worshiping in a physical place anymore. It's not that we've gone to Mount Sinai anymore, but we've come to Mount Zion, a spiritual place. And then he calls it the heavenly Jerusalem. So even in our worship experiences, we are experiencing the joy that we have because we are getting a foretaste of that heavenly Jerusalem, of that city that comes down from above. But there's still something more that we're looking forward to. And the writer of Hebrews keeps both of these ideas intact, that we're tasting it now, but we've not fully received all that there is to have from it. And so in places like Hebrews chapter 13, verse 14, there he says that we're still looking forward to this new Jerusalem, this heavenly city. And so here, what John is trying to show us is that there is all the promises of that kingdom of God where he dwells and where he reigns. That's finally coming down to be with us. And it comes more clearly in the following verses. And then he hears a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals, and he will dwell with them and be their God." So let's see. If you have an English Bible, some of your English Bibles will be kind enough to put a footnote there by the word home. Maybe your translation was even better and they used the actual Hebrew word there that would make more sense for us. But if you look at that footnote, so in my NRSV Bible, the footnote for the word home says tabernacle. See, the home of God is actually, see, the tabernacle of God is among mortals. A very simple way of understanding what the word tabernacle is the word tent. Now, tabernacle refers to that specific tent that God dwelt in when he was in the wilderness with the people. But just notice, the tent of God, the tabernacle of God, is with the people. So let's ask the question, who's going where? We're not getting taken out, but God is coming in. He is bringing his kingdom to us. When God comes down with the second coming, he brings the fullness of the kingdom, and his tent, the tabernacle, comes and it gets planted right in the middle of the people. And so this is not, nor has it ever been, the Bible has not, nor has the Bible ever been a story about us getting to God. In between, you may find small little stories like that. For example, the Tower of Babel. But overall, the Bible has never been a story about us getting to God. It has always been a story about God coming to us. So rather than thinking about how do we get into heaven, if we were only listening to Christ when he preached, we would have recognized that his message was always about how the kingdom has come, how it's in our midst now. So, to put it one way, we're not going to heaven because heaven is coming to us. And we have to have the faith and the vision and the discipline to not only recognize it, but to live it as citizens of the kingdom of God. And so in the next part of that verse, he will dwell with them as their God. The word dwell in your English Bibles may have, again, another footnote. And it's the same word, tabernacle. Now, how is it that the word tabernacle in one place refers to, in the first part of the verse, refers to a place, but now here it's a thing that he does, he will dwell with them? So there's many words like that, even in our English language, that can be used both as a noun or as a verb. So think about the word house. A house is that place where you stay, but then you can use it as the word housed, right? So that means that where you keep things, where you are supposed to keep things. So where something is housed is where you're supposed to keep things. So here, God is going to be where? With the people. He will dwell with them. He will tabernacle with them. And so again, it reminds us of not necessarily of everything is fine. It reminds us that God's presence makes everything better. Like how God's presence was with the Israelites in the wilderness. Of course, by this point in time, there's no more wilderness, but still we understand that this is what the wilderness experience was pointing us towards. And for those people who recognized it even then, they would have foretasted what is being spoken of in Revelation chapter 21. More than this, John is not introducing us to this idea for the first time. He's told us this before. In John chapter 1, verse 14, there it says, the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen the glory of God. There, the word, and you can go and look at it in our English translations, there will be a footnote if your Bible is so kind as to key this in for you. And if you look at the footnote, it will say, the word became flesh and tented or tabernacled amongst us. That is to say that what we're talking about here in Revelation chapter 21, this isn't the first time, and it shouldn't be the first time that we're hearing it. We've heard this when we heard the gospel. God came and lived among us. That's what the word Emmanuel means. Every Christmas, we are echoing themes of Revelation chapter 21. And so this is why when we read this passage, this is why I think we're so excited, because from childhood, we've been hearing all of these themes, and they all come into the highest concentration in this final chapter. Now, this is why if you read the book of Revelation and then go back and read the other parts of the Bible, you'll recognize that in some way, the whole Bible uses the language of revelation. It's just that Revelation hadn't been written yet. It took a brilliant and humble person like John to be able to bring all of these ideas together for us through the power of the Holy Spirit, so that we're able to make all these connections. So moving further on, in verse 4, we see that he will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. These are all the hopes and dreams that we find from the Old Testament to the New Testament. These are texts from Isaiah, texts from the Psalms, texts from Jesus's own sermons, like the Beatitudes, all coming together. Very specifically, if you just look at the idea that's found when you get to verse 5, see, I'm making all things new. That's a quotation from Isaiah, chapter 65, verse 17. Everything that we hoped for, everything that we could possibly dream for, becomes not just a dream any longer. It's not just a vision anymore. It becomes an actual reality. So much so that the Beatitudes that Jesus was speaking about, that sounded like they could make sense, but they're very difficult to fully comprehend, they become a reality. Those who mourn, they'll be comforted. The people who are meek, well, they become the children of God. They're the ones who are inheriting the earth, as we'll see in verse 7 here. Now, In verse 6, a voice comes again, and this is the voice of the One. And he says, "It is done. It is done." Now, this might sound familiar. It might sound like what Jesus said on the cross, but at least in most of our English translations, they were good enough to make it clear that these are two different words. In the English, Jesus does not from the cross say, "It is done." Instead, from the cross, Jesus says, "It is finished." Now, is done and finished, aren't they the same thing? Probably in our English language, or maybe even in Malayalam, they're very similar. Even I'm sure in Greek, there are similarities between the two, but there are clear distinctions between the two as well. These are, first of all, two different words. Jesus on the cross says, "It is finished." God from the throne said, "It is done." What does that mean? Well, when Jesus on the cross said, "It is finished," what he's saying is, it is complete. There is nothing more to add. The work that he intended to do, he did it to its fullest. It is finished. Now here it would, but now when we get to this word, "it is done," we might assume that because we're in the book of Revelation, that it's referring to the idea of it's also complete, but it's not quite. The word here, the Greek word here, means it has come to fruition. It has come to be. It's the same word that's used when giving birth and the child has been delivered. You say that it is done. Not the life of the child is done. The life of the child is just beginning. But now the thing that we have hoped for, the thing that we're waiting for, it's finally here. And so it is a kind of a coming to fruition. Let's put it another way. Maybe this makes more sense because it uses the analogy of food. You could say that a cake is done, but that means something very different than to say that the cake is finished. When we say that the cake is finished, we say that the cake has been eaten. When we say that the cake is done, we're saying that it's just coming out of the oven. And this is the mystery of the gospel. And this is why I think it's so important to notice, why is God then, right after this phrase, referring to himself by using time markers? I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. If God didn't say that, we might think, "Oh, wait a minute, God, you got that backwards. Didn't you mean to say that it has come to fruition on the cross and now it is finished here?" No, God knows what he's doing. And all time from beginning to end, he is able to reveal to us this mystery. This is the mystery of the gospel, that we have tasted the kingdom of God long before the oven has beeped, long before it has come into its final form. You see, we must never underestimate the work that Jesus has done on the cross. Perhaps, and I've been trying to figure this out, perhaps poor theology has made us think that the cross of Christ has only fixed certain things, some things, and we're still waiting for the second coming to happen so that he can fix everything else. But in fact, from the cross, evil has been defeated. From the cross, Paul is able to look at that moment and say, "Death has been defeated. Where is your sting, O death? Where is your victory? It is no more. It is nothing, because what Christ has done is he has done it all. He has finished it." And so what are we expecting and what are we waiting for with the second coming? We're waiting for the fruition of it. We're waiting for the fullness of the experience of it. And this is what the second coming is about. The second coming isn't a moment in history that we're waiting for God to fix everything. He's already fixed it and he's entrusted the rest to us. The second coming is the fruition of everything. It is the culmination of all of the mission that he has entrusted us from the Garden of Eden till now. So in addition to this idea, this aspect of it is finished versus it is done, in John's gospel, he also has noted down for us, by the way, it's John's gospel that says it is finished, right? So that's how we're making this comparison. And then in John's gospel also, he talks about, I am thirsty. And here he happens to mention this concept of thirst again. So here, all thirst now is finally quenched. So you see that there is this give and take. He's thirsty, but it is finished. It is done, and now everyone is being given the ability to quench their thirst. And so at this point in time, we could say, wherever this point of time is, at this point in time, we can say that we get full access to that same well that the Samaritan woman had. And we get to drink from the fountain of life. Next, in the following set of verses, we have a section, a small section, that talks about, by the way, only those people who are meant for the kingdom of God, those people who want to follow Christ, who have been living a life of discipleship, they will enter. And all these other people, but as for the cowardly, the faithless, the polluted, the murderers, and then the list continues for a bit, they are not going to be included. This is not to say that those people still are around at this point in time. It's just a reminder to all of us that as we look forward to this wonderful scene, that we ought not lose sight of who we are now and how we are acting now. It doesn't mean much if we're really much looking forward to the kingdom of God, and yet all the while we continue to say lies to one another. We continue to mix truth with half-truths, with falsehoods. This kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out business does not work. And those people, in the end, will get what they fully deserve, which is life outside, life apart from the goodness and the mercies of God. The next section from verses 9 onwards talks about this New Jerusalem, the vision of the New Jerusalem. And here we have an angel who is showing to John another angle. Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And so he's taken to a different position, and now he's seeing the same thing. It's not that Jerusalem comes down. The New Jerusalem does not come down 2 times. Again, we've seen this many times before. It's the same descent. And now we get a picture, more details of this Jerusalem. It has 12 gates and 12 foundations, which means it is able to link together the tribes of Israel along with the church of God. All of these communities become one community. The gates are listed by 3 on the south, 3 on the north, 3 on the east, 3 on the west. And this is a reference back to Ezekiel chapter 48, verses 31 to 34. And so if you want to get more of the meat, more of the flavor and the juice of what this means, you have to go back to Ezekiel and read the surrounding passages that give more light to this passage. Next, the angel measures the city. And we've seen this before. Measuring is a way of marking God's protection and care for the people, for the city. We see the dimensions of the city. It's perfect dimensions. It's 12,000 stadia. Some translations may have written it as, translated as miles, which kind of hides the beauty of the number. And so it's probably better just to leave it as stadias, and that unit of measurement is unfamiliar to us, but that's okay, because again, it's not about the actual literal dimensions. It's about the metaphor. And 12,000 by 12,000 by 12,000 high. It's a beautifully shaped cube. And this cube, though it seems kind of odd that a city would be shaped as a cube, well, it reminds us, or it should take our minds back to the Holy of Holies, which was shaped as a cube. In the next section, you see all of these gems that are mentioned. And you see that when you start to get to lists like that, you might want to skip over it, or you might wonder, why are they mentioning all of these things? But there's a very beautiful rationale behind taking the time to list all these stones. These stones are very similar to the ones found in Exodus chapter 28, verse 17, where there it lists all the stones that need to be on the ephod, or the breastplate of the high priest. And so there were 12 precious stones kept on his garments. And so what does that mean then in the context of the city? Well, it means that this city has a priestly distinction. It has the honor of being able to worship God and draw others into worship of God. We get further elaborations on just the beauty of this kingdom, how there are streets of gold, how the gate is like a giant pearl. Now, this is not meant to imply that God is some sort of mega rich guy who's trying to impress us with how much money he has and to show off his opulence. That's not at all what's happening here. Please note that it is our love of gold that compels us to see things in these ways, not that it's something at all valuable to God, because God owns everything. And so this is a metaphor. It is clearly a metaphor. And it means that those streets are precious. And it means that those streets are pure because they're a part of that holy city. And so even the very place that you walk becomes a priceless place to be. And entering in through that great pearl of great price. I mean, I hope you can hear the echoes of Jesus's parables when he's talking about how the kingdom of heaven is like a great pearl. All of these things are meant to show us the profound dignity and beauty of God's kingdom. Finally, we get to a section where there is no temple. When we get to verse 22, I saw no temple in the city, for the temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, the Lamb. So those guys who currently don't come to church, maybe they were onto something. I hope everyone knows that I'm being sarcastic. At this point in time, no one goes to church because church is everywhere. At this point in time, the only thing that matters is the person who we worship, not the place where we worship, because everywhere can be a place where we can worship the person of God. And in fact, if we go back and reread Hebrews chapter 12, you'll recognize that that's what they've been telling us all along, that it was always supposed to be about the person and not just about the place. Here, finally, the place that was a symbol, the temple was always meant to be a symbol of God's presence. That symbol is no longer needed because God is fully with his people. The other symbol, the sun and the moon, the lights, and here Revelation refers to these lights as a lamp. That is, the Lamb will be the lamp because there's no need for the sun and the moon. The word lamp sounds like a very strange way of describing the sun and the moon, but it's exactly the way that it's described in Genesis chapter 1. Our English and perhaps our Malayalam translations hide that because we're not used to saying the word lamps when we refer to the sun and to the moon, but this is exactly the word that is used in Hebrew to refer to those things. And this is why John is able to say this and make this connection. There's no need for the sun to give its light by day, nor for the moon to give its reflected moonlight in the dark times where the sun is far from us. At this point in time, God is our light. And this does not again mean that at some point in time, God will destroy the sun. And so we're estimating how long will that be when the second, don't do all that. That's not what this is about. This is about showing us that we no longer need to walk by sight of the sun. Instead, we walk by faith in the light of Christ, in the light of his will, in the light of his glory. This kingdom is open 24 hours a day. It has its gates wide open. And that's what's said here. The gates will never be shut by day and there will be no night there. So there's no point in even saying 24 hours, because maybe it's just a bunch of 12 hours. The people will come into this place, except for the unclean. The unclean will not enter, nor will anyone who practices abomination or falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Again, this may not be trying to tell us that in the end of all things, that there still may be wayward souls wandering about. This is, I think, a reminder to us that as we look forward and as we're definitely anticipating that future experience, we should not forget about our present life today. And we need to make sure that we are in the right camp, the camp that follows God, the camp that bows down in humility and in confession, and that serves the people around them. So this is the culmination of what we're looking forward to, but there's still more. There's still one more chapter left. And so we will take up that final chapter next time. So we'll pause here and take any questions that you have.